Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm Caroline Fredrickson. I'm the Executive Director of the American Constitution Society for Law and Policy. And for those of you in the room, although there are probably not many, who may not know ACS, we are a national network of lawyers and law students, policymakers, academics, and judges who believe in the vitality of our Constitution and its fundamental values: individual rights and liberties, genuine equality, access to justice, democracy, and the rule of law. And we do have student chapters across the country at almost every accredited law school, and I believe there are some of our student members who are here in DC this summer or have joined us tonight. So we welcome you to DC in this conversation. I have the great honor and pleasure of introducing the Honorable Jeh Charles Johnson, General Counsel of the Department of Defense. In the materials that you picked up outside, you have a full biography of Mr. Johnson, so I will not go into great detail because his accomplishments are legion, and we could spend our entire evening talking about those, but I think we want to get to the substance. Mr. Johnson assumed his position on February 10th, 2009, after being confirmed by the Senate. He is the legal advisor to the Secretary of Defense and is Chief Legal Officer of the Defense Department, our country's largest government agency. To appreciate the enormity of this task, Mr. Johnson is responsible for the work of roughly 10,000 lawyers. But the challenge, as you may well know, is not just one of numbers, but also of substance, because he deals with an array of critical issues which are on the front page every day: Guantanamo, WikiLeaks, drone attacks, Libya, and the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So this is hardly a low-profile portfolio. His professional trajectory provides an example of how a lawyer can affect change and do meaningful work in a variety of contexts, as his career has been marked by a mixture of prestigious private practice and distinguished public service. In short, we could not have a better speaker tonight to discuss these very important topics for our country. So please join me in welcoming Jeh Johnson.
Thank you very much. Let me apologize again for being late. I'm a New Yorker. I brought New York traffic with me. The gridlock out there was it was like 10 minutes per block. I could have crawled faster from the Pentagon. There was a time, I suspect, when the job of General Counsel of the Defense Department was a bit sleepier than it is now, way back before 9/11, during times of peace, when the General Counsel of the Defense Department focused on matters more in line with what the service general counsels focus on: fiscal law, acquisition, environmental issues, and we still have all those issues, but the job post 9/11 has become one, as was described, where many of the issues that we deal with on a daily basis are issues that you read about on the front pages. I came into the job and I occupied the job of Air Force General Counsel, believing that a General Counsel is neither seen or ever heard. In this job, I have, in about 2.5 years, I have probably testified in either an unclassified or a classified setting before Congress at least a dozen times. There have been several profiles about me in the news, some positive, some not so positive. All of a sudden, people are interested in what I have to say. That's not always true around my house with my 2 teenagers, by the way. By the way, do we have any members of the press here? I know we have at least one. If you all could just self-identify yourselves. There you are. So I just know who you are. Okay, I see some familiar faces. I always like to know who I'm talking to. Sometimes it's apparent. In this internet age, if any one person in the room is a journalist or a blogger, you may as well be talking to the entire world, especially if you have something interesting to say. So the job is, in fact, one of many demanding issues on the front page. Just by way of background, I've been in this administration for 2.5 years now, but I've been on this journey with Barack Obama for almost 5. He recruited me to his potential campaign on November 22nd, 2006. I got to know him in the course of 2006. He called me. I still have the pink message slip, one of my most valuable mementos. He called me in my office at Paul Weiss on November 22nd, 2006. I was meeting with an associate, and so my secretary dutifully took a message from Senator Barack Obama. I called him back. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and he said, "Jay, I'm thinking about running for president. Will you stay neutral, not commit to any other candidate until I make up my mind?" And at that point, I had already decided that if asked, I would commit early. And it was, in fact, way earlier than I thought I would agree to support any of the candidates in the Democratic field. But I was very, very impressed with Senator Obama, so I committed on the spot. And shortly thereafter, my friend Jonathan Alter from Newsweek, a neighbor of mine from Montclair, New Jersey, outed me as a former Clinton administration official who was supporting Barack Obama. I remember John called me and he said, "I'm thinking about doing this story about former Clinton administration officials who are now supporting Senator Obama. Can I use your name? Do you mind being quoted?" I said, "No, not at all." So the story came out in his Periscope piece in Newsweek magazine, and what I did not appreciate until I read the story was that I was the only former Clinton administration official who was willing to be named as an Obama. All the others were anonymous, and so I was getting emails, "You are way out there." Over the course of the campaign, I was involved on the National Finance Committee as a national security legal advisor. I had been General Counsel of the Air Force, so everybody thought I had all this wisdom and knowledge about national security law. And I served as a lawyer for the campaign, surrogate TV. I was a delegate to the convention. I canvassed in Des Moines, in northwest Des Moines, Iowa, for 8 days, late December, early January 2008. I canvassed in West Philadelphia. I canvassed in Northeast Philadelphia before the Pennsylvania primary, and was involved in the transition and one of the first Senate-confirmed presidential appointees of the new administration. So it's been quite a ride. I never have a dull day. People ask me, "Are you having fun? Are you enjoying yourself?" And I say, "No, I'm not having fun. I'm not enjoying myself, but it is the most interesting, fulfilling job I will probably ever have." I have 10 deputies. Three or four are political appointees. And in the Office of the General Counsel, the General Counsel is responsible for doing the legal review and providing the legal approval for just about every military operation that the Secretary of Defense and the President must approve before they approve them. We have an international law division which handles international law matters and military ops matters. We have an intelligence division. We have a personnel and health policy division, an acquisition division, which in and of itself handles many large matters like the recently completed Air Force tanker competition. We have an environment and installations division, which handles BRAC issues, environmental issues. We have a fiscal law division, also known as the color of money. You have to have an appropriation and authorization to spend every single dollar in the Department of Defense, as is the case with every other government agency. We have a litigation division, which oversees litigation brought by and against the Department of Defense. As you can imagine, most of the litigation is brought against the Department of Defense. And we have what we call a legal counsel division, which is like our version of OLC, which really handles detainee matters, the wonderful world of detainee affairs, which I will come back to. We have a division that handles legislation and an ethics division, ethics, personnel matters, civilian ethics. I think I've covered it. And those divisions present us with very interesting issues. As you can imagine, some are more pressing than others. I come to work, and 40% of what I do that day I didn't know I'd be doing when I woke up that morning. My day starts at 6 o'clock in the morning and goes through to about 7:30, 8 o'clock, and I have anywhere between 10 and 15 meetings a day. I wanted to talk to you about a couple of things. What is interesting is that we've been able to, I think, accomplish several things in this job. But the job at times can be incredibly frustrating. But you feel like you're just bailing buckets of water out of a sinking boat on a lot of days. But 2009, one of the things we're able to accomplish in the new administration was military commissions reform with the passage of the Military Commissions Act of 2009, which was passed by the Congress really on a bipartisan basis with the support of the administration and, I think very importantly, the support of our JAG community. When I first came into office and we undertook this detainee policy review in the new administration, one of the things we looked at was whether and how to reform military commissions, which were very controversial. The 2006 Military Commissions Act was controversial. And so we undertook a review. And so I gathered all of the JAG community, prosecution, defense, the convening authority, some of the judges, our judge advocate generals from each service. And I found even within the JAG community, even among our prosecutors involved in military commissions cases, that a very controversial aspect of the 2006 law was the possibility of using in a prosecution against a detainee statements taken from the detainee as a result of cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment, CID, as it is known around the Pentagon. That was a controversial aspect of the 2006 law, and our JAG community and even our prosecutors said we should get rid of that because it discredits the system. And within the JAG community, military justice is a cherished institution. And so we early on developed a series of reforms, proposed reforms, which the President in May 2009 decided to adopt and embrace. And at around the same time, the Senate Armed Services Committee, on a bipartisan basis, undertook reforms itself. We collaborated, we merged, and we got through the Congress and through a number of regulatory changes, reforms to that system that I think improve the system. We recently also hired a new chief prosecutor who is very much a legend in the JAG community and the U.S. military, Brigadier General Mark Martins, who finished first in just about every school he's ever attended. He finished first at West Point. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He was on the Harvard Law Review with the president. And Mark is one of the best and brightest JAGs in the U.S. military. He was involved with us in military commissions reform, and he's recently agreed, when his assignment in Afghanistan now ends, to be our chief prosecutor. We have a terrific convening authority and retired Admiral Bruce McDonald. We have a terrific chief defense counsel, Jeff Caldwell. So we have a good system there, and obviously we have some high-stakes cases in the military commission system. KSM, Nashiri, the alleged cold bomber. So those are reforms that we got in 2009, and one of the things that I learned from that experience is when you're dealing with complex national security matters, complex matters involving military detention, detainee matters commissions, that you get change, you get new laws, reforms from the bipartisan center, and then you work out from there. It's very, very difficult to get change in these very complex national security legal issues working with entirely a coalition on the right or a coalition on the left. Better to start from the bipartisan center and work out. And that's what happened in the Congress in 2009 on military commissions reform. In 2010, we undertook a new assignment. I was appointed by the Secretary of Defense, along with General Carter Ham, to co-chair a working group that would assess the risk of repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell on the U.S. military. This was something that the Secretary of Defense announced in Senate testimony February 2nd, 2010. And we decided, after the President in his State of the Union address said, I will work with the Congress and the military to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell in 2010, to undertake this study. It was going to be a 10-month study. The Secretary believed, and I think in retrospect, this was, remarkably wise on his part, that if the Congress was going to repeal this law, it needed to be after we had done this careful assessment and a very collaborative, inclusive assessment. My direction was to systematically engage the force on this somewhat emotional topic. And what we did over the next 10 months was to engage in what in fact turned out to be probably the largest engagement of the force on any personnel-related issue. We, in effect, I believe, had a conversation with the U.S. military about the risk of repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And we essentially had a twofold mission. One was to assess the risk of repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell on military readiness, military effectiveness, unit cohesion, recruiting, retention, and this concept called family readiness. And then to recommend appropriate changes, if necessary, to existing regs, policies, and guidance in the event of repeal. That was our twofold mandate. And at the time, Carter Ham was the commander of U.S. Army Europe, based in Germany, and I was the General Counsel, still am. So this was my night job for 10 months, in addition to being the lawyer for the Department of Defense. And over the course of 10 months, we solicited the views of 400,000 service members in a survey conducted by a firm called Westat. We received 115,000 responses, a response rate of 28%. We solicited the views of 150,000 military spouses, received 44,266 responses. We opened up an online inbox, received 72,384 emails that way. We conducted 95 face-to-face information exchange forums at 51 bases around the world. We came face-to-face in those, like in everything in the military, you give it a fairly innocuous name, and then you make it into an acronym. So my working group was called the CRWG, Comprehensive Review Working Group, which could refer to virtually any topic. Could have been arms control. And we call these these were in effect large group sessions or town halls. But town hall, you think of a healthcare discussion. So we call them information exchange forums, and then we made it into an acronym, IEFs. We had 95 IEFs, 51 bases, came face-to-face with about 24,000 service members. In this discussion about Don't Ask, Don't Tell, between General Ham and myself, we probably came face-to-face with about 12,000 service members. In sessions of, say, 300 to 400 service members each, in places like Fort Hood, Fort Bragg, Camp Lejeune, Parris Island, Peterson Air Force Base, all of the academies. I actually learned a lot about the U.S. military just on this road trip. 140 focus group sessions. We talked to all of the academy superintendents, service chiefs, people on the Hill, veterans groups, other interested groups, we opened up a confidential communication mechanism where service members could talk to us on a confidential, anonymous basis about their experiences with this law. We received 2,691 responses that way, 296 from those who self-identified as gay or lesbian. I will say that in the course of this review and in the course of listening to people talk about this issue, one of the criticisms in Congress in the lame duck session when we made this report public was, well, you didn't ask them what they thought. You only asked these very specific questions in the survey. You didn't listen to the force. But that's exactly what we did. When we came face to face with 24,000 service members and we had a session in a group maybe 3 times this size, inevitably the discussion was, we shouldn't repeal the law, or we should keep it, or we should get rid of it. That was inevitably the discussion, that you'd ask very focused questions, but inevitably people would say the law is working or no, it's not. And one of the things that is reflected in our report that became apparent to us, 2 things that became apparent to us. One is that the overwhelming majority of service members already recognized that they had had the experience of serving with somebody they believed to be gay. When I would ask that question, I'd begin every session with, those of you in this room, how many of you have already had the experience of serving with someone in your unit that you believed to be gay or lesbian? And maybe 80% of the hands would go up. And then I would ask, of those with your hands up, how many of you believed that the presence of that gay or lesbian service member affected unit cohesion, the unit's ability to get the job down? Almost every hand went down. Maybe 3 would stay up. And so when service members were asked to think about the experience of serving with somebody they believed to be gay or lesbian, though the law did not permit that gay or lesbian service member to be open about their sexual orientation, people had a pretty good experience. That's one thing. Second thing is that when service members talked about the concept of serving with someone who was quote unquote openly gay or lesbian, it conjured up for a lot of people misperception stereotypes. There was, to be sure, a lot of moral and religious concerns, opposition within the military to repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But we recognized that a lot of what we were hearing based on a misperception and a stereotype. Somehow even the word open, serving openly as gay or lesbian conjured up an image for people that of various different, frankly, stereotypes. So General Ham and I recognized that almost from the outset, at least midway through the review. And so one of the things that we said in our report was this. This is in the executive summary. In the course of our assessment, it became apparent to us that aside from the moral and religious objections to homosexuality, much of the concern about quote-unquote open service is driven by misperceptions and stereotypes about what it would mean if gay service members were allowed to be open about their sexual orientation. Repeatedly, we heard service members express the view that open homosexuality would lead to widespread and overt displays of femininity among men, homosexual promiscuity, harassment, and unwelcome advances within units, invasions of personal privacy, and an overall erosion of standards of conduct, unit cohesion, and morality. Based on our review, however, we conclude that these concerns about gay and lesbian service members who are permitted to be open about their sexual orientation are exaggerated and are not consistent with the reported experiences of many service members. The other point that came across to us in reading a lot of the confidential emails we received from gay and lesbian service members and meeting with gay and lesbian former service members was this. In communications with gay and lesbian current and former service members, we repeatedly heard a patriotic desire to serve and defend the nation, subject to the same rules as everyone else. In the words of one gay service member, repeal would simply take a knife out of my back. You have no idea what it is like to serve in silence. Most said that they did not desire special treatment, to use the military for social experimentation, or to advance a social agenda. Some of those separated under Don't Ask, Don't Tell would welcome the opportunity to rejoin the military if permitted. From them, we heard expressed many of the same values that we heard over and over again from service members at large. Love of country, honor, respect, integrity, and service over self. We simply cannot square the reality of these people with the perceptions about open service. One of the things that one of the quotes that we received by email from General Ham and I would read hundreds and hundreds of these emails as they came in, and some of them really struck us as representative of the other 72,000 we were seeing, and they're reflected in the report, both pro-repeal and pro-status quo. We tried to reprint the representative comments, unvarnished, we were getting. But one of the quotes that is in our executive summary, which we both thought was particularly reflective, was this. This is from someone on an anonymous basis. I don't think it's going to be such a big, huge, horrible thing that DOD is telling everyone it's going to be. If it is repealed, everyone will look around their spaces to see if anyone speaks up. They'll hear crickets for a while. A few flamboyant guys and tough girls will join to rock the boat and make a scene. Their actions and bad choices will probably get them kicked out. After a little time has gone by, then a few of us will speak up, and instead of a deluge of panic and violence, there'll be a ripple on the water's surface that dissipates quicker than you can watch. One of the more significant moments for me was in the early part of the review. I was having lunch with military spouses, wives who were very active in volunteer work, supporting military families, and I met this one Marine wife who had driven 300 miles to see us, to come meet with us from North Carolina. And she was probably no more than 22, 23 years old. I don't know whether she had a college education or not. But she was very animated, motivated by the issue. And I didn't really get a chance to talk to her. I said, you drive 300 miles to see me, you get to write me an email. Here's my email address. And this Marine wife wrote an email to me, which I reprinted in its entirety at page 119 of this report, which so, in my judgment, captured the issue. And she reduced it to, yes, it'll be difficult, but over time we will do this, and we should do this, just as the military has accepted and embraced other changes in history. So both General Ham and I were struck by all of this, and then the survey came out. And the survey, which was statistically significant across just about every segment of the military imaginable. Usually when you do a presidential poll, you might poll 3,000 people. We had a response rate of 28% among, we had 115,000 respondents. And it was a 102 question survey. Basically, there were three things that came out of this survey. One was 69% of the force had already had the experience of serving in a unit with somebody they believed to be gay or lesbian, 69%. Of those who said they had that experience, something like 90% said it did not affect the unit's ability to get the job done. And now this was reflected in a number of different questions, a number of different ways, and that was basically it. The third set of questions, which caught the media's attention when the report leaked, was this 70% number. Basically, we asked service members, what do you predict in the event the law is repealed about your unit? And something like, I'm not going to get this exactly right, but something like 50%, 50 to 55% said mixed effects, mixed positive and negative effects. And then another, actually it was like 30-something%, and then another 20% said no effect, which gets you to about 50 to 55%. And then another 15 to 20% actually said it would have a positive effect on unit cohesion if the law were repealed. And my read of that 15% number was that the service member knows this other service member in my unit is probably gay, but he can't be honest about it. And if he's honest about it, that improves unit cohesion. So you take those three numbers together, you mash them together, and the headline in the press was 70% of the military doesn't care anymore about this issue. Then there was a 30% number, which was significantly higher in the Marine Corps. We went public with this report on November 29th, 2010, right in the middle of the lame duck session of Congress. General Ham and I testified 2 days later. The chiefs testified 2 days after that. And the bill, which was drafted over the summer of 2010 in anticipation of our report, passed the House, but did not get out of the Senate. And somebody had the bright idea, well, why not just do a freestanding bill, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell Repeal Act of 2010, which made it through the House and then made it through the Senate with something like 63, 65 votes, including a number of Republican votes. And what motivated a number of members of Congress, and I know several Republicans, was that this should be done, this repeal should be, and I know this motivated the Secretary of Defense, and he said so on a number of occasions, that if repeal is to be brought about, it should be done by the political branches of government in consultation with the military, not the courts. And we had had the experience of the log cabin Republicans case, where for about a week in October, we were suddenly enjoined worldwide from enforcing every aspect of this law. And eventually the Ninth Circuit imposed a stay on the injunction, which they last week recently removed. It's a whole other story. And but that experience for a lot of people indicated that this is something that if it's to be done, should be done by the political branches, by the Congress, the President in consultation with the military. And that, I think, was decisive for a number of members of Congress. And the bill passed. It was signed into law on December 22nd, 2010. I think several people in this room were present for that bill signing. One of the things the President said in his remarks was he quoted from the report, is his favorite quote, from an anonymous service member. This is supposedly the President's favorite quote. Let me find it. Oh yeah, here it is. As one Special Operations Force warfighter told us, we have a gay guy in the unit. He's big, he's mean, and he kills lots of bad guys. No one cared that he was gay. So we're in the implementation phase of repeal right now. The way the law works, the President, the Secretary, and the Chairman must each certify to Congress that they've read this report, that the necessary policies and regulations to implement the post-repeal environment have been created, and that implementation of those policies and regs, and I'm paraphrasing here, is consistent with military effectiveness, unit cohesion, and the like. We've said publicly that implementation, the creation of these new policies and regs, the education and training of the force of 2 million people is going well. We're in the final stages. And so I think that the recommendations of the military leadership to the chairman and the secretary will be teed up very soon, and the three will consider certification in very short order. So that's where we are on that issue. One other thing I wanted to mention, and then I'll take questions, I'll stop talking, is on the issue of detainee affairs. Issues surrounding military commissions, Guantanamo Bay, whether alleged terrorists should be sent to federal court in the United States, whether they should be tried by military commissions, law of war detention, transferred to a foreign country is an issue of intense interest in the Congress. There are provisions in the House and Senate defense authorization bills that address the issue, the overall issue. We had recently a transfer of a detainee, as many of you have read, from a ship in the Middle East to the Southern District of New York for prosecution there, who has affiliations and connections with Al-Shabaab and AQAP. And some are wrestling with the issue of what are the appropriate options for dealing with alleged terrorists in this post-Bin Laden world. My view is this. Some ask, why use the federal courts to prosecute terrorist activity? The answer for many is send them all to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, for military detention and/or prosecution there. There are proposals in Congress right now to legally mandate this very outcome. There is danger in over-militarizing our approach to the current terrorist threat. We must guard against the impulse to automatically send into military custody every terrorist, every alleged terrorist, particularly those arrested on American soil for acts that violate American law. Our military is the most powerful in the world, respected and revered in our free society, in part because of the limits we place on its ability to reach into the other areas of national security typically occupied by civilian law enforcement. One of the lessons learned from September 11, 2011, is that broad and aggressive assertions of executive authority are legally controversial and invite challenge. Overreaching results in national security setbacks, not gains, a point best illustrated by the question Donald Rumsfeld once asked of my predecessor. So, am I going to go down in history as the only Secretary of Defense to have lost a case to a terrorist? As the lawyer for the Department of Defense, I have worked with a bipartisan coalition in Congress to create a more sustainable and credible military commission system where we will prosecute Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and others. With the Department of Justice, we have worked to achieve a rising rate of success in habeas corpus litigation brought by Guantanamo detainees and to improve our credibility in the courts generally. But against an unconventional terrorist enemy that can emerge anytime, anywhere, the military is not the only answer. There are other effective instruments of national power legally available to address this terrorist threat. As a former federal prosecutor, I know firsthand the strength, security, and effectiveness of our federal court system. It is well equipped to handle the prosecution of dangerous domestic and international terrorists. As a result of lengthy prison sentences authorized by Congress and contemplated by the federal sentencing guidelines, those convicted of terrorist acts often face decades, if not life, in prison. With all the tools now legally available, President Obama has vigorously and successfully taken the fight to al-Qaeda and its affiliates, and he has not hesitated to use all the instruments of national power to combat the terrorist threat. He has stepped up and focused the fight against al-Qaeda's senior leadership. He acted courageously, as Secretary Gates put it, in ordering the raid on May 1st, once we found bin Laden. We have not hesitated to use lawful lethal force against bin Laden and others who represent grave threats to our national security. And al-Qaeda senior leadership is today seriously degraded, as you've heard from a number of national security experts. Meanwhile, not a single Guantanamo detainee has been released into the United States. And as I said before, the administration has won an impressive string of court victories in the habeas litigation brought by Guantanamo detainees, and has prevailed thus far against an attempt in litigation to extend the habeas remedy into Afghanistan. At the same time, this administration, like its predecessors, continues to successfully prosecute terrorists in our federal courts. The results speak for themselves. No terrorist that has been accused of being part of al-Qaeda has been acquitted following a prosecution by the Department of Justice. Though degraded, we know that al-Qaeda and its affiliates remain determined to conduct terrorist attacks against the United States. We know that in the post-Bin Laden era, the al-Qaeda threat is likely to evolve and become more complex, diversified, and decentralized. To meet this threat, we must utilize all the tools lawfully at our disposal, whether it is lethal raid on a compound, detention, interrogation, or prosecution in our federal courts or by military commissions. Our continued success depends on this. The two final points I'd like to make are, first of all, to you younger lawyers in the group here, just to talk to you about the virtues of public service. A number of you went to law school with the ambition to go into public service, serve the country, and so many of us, once we get into law school, we're recruited by Paul Weiss, Covington and Burling, Aiken Gump. They take us to lunch. First-year associates make more than I make now. And many of us lose the public service ambition once we get into the private sector cycle. And we have families, we take on responsibilities, we take on a mortgage. And to those of you who are in this career track, I would encourage you to not lose that ambition to go into public service. This is my third stint in public service. So I've committed an act of financial suicide 3 times in my career. First, to become an assistant U.S. attorney. I'm a Paul Weiss alumnus 3 times over. In 1988, I left Paul Weiss to be an assistant U.S. attorney. In 1998, I left Paul Weiss to become General Counsel of the Department of the Air Force, and then in 2008, in the 10-year cycles, I left Paul Weiss to become General Counsel of the Defense Department. And so I would say to you all that it is possible to have, as was mentioned, a distinguished career in public service and the private sector, and it's fulfilling. I think of my career as getting the most out of a law degree. And the other thing I'd say to you is many people today, and Secretary Gates is particularly eloquent on this subject, talk about the increasing social divide between our civilian society and culture and our military. It is the case that less than 1% of Americans are in the fight to defend 100% of us. And when you meet service members forward deployed in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, what is so remarkable is their enthusiasm for their mission. You know, they're in a situation where, you know, they're deployed for months and months at a time. They miss their family. They're deployed over holidays, multiple deployments, very often on a shorter turnaround time than they were originally led to believe. You visit a service member, a wounded warrior in a place like Landstuhl or Bethesda. What is so remarkable, and when I meet a wounded warrior who just 48 hours before had his leg blown off by an IED, the first impulse of that service member, once he's coherent again, when he meets somebody like me, is, Mr. Johnson, help me get back to my unit. Or do you think that the loss of 2 limbs will affect my ability to get a command? The concept of unit cohesion for these people is so powerful that when they're dislocated from their unit with a serious life-threatening injury, their first impulse is, I got to get back to my friends in the unit. And so the level of commitment among these young people in our military today is extraordinary. And so to those of you in civilian life, the thing I would encourage you to do is to just appreciate our military, even if it means, in an airport layover, you see somebody in uniform, just stop and thank them for their service. They do appreciate it. And so I guess on that note, I will stop talking, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you. Okay, who has a question? Yes, sir. Politico, right?
Metro Weekly.
Metro Weekly, okay.
Okay. Okay.
I could probably hear you without the mic. Maybe they can't, but I.
Yeah. I actually have two questions.
Two questions.
One about process. You talked about the fact that we're in the final stages. It will be teed up very soon and in short order. All three of those are very vague terms for a very specific process that's going on right now. And the department confirmed yesterday that all of the service chiefs, all of the service secretaries, and the combatant commanders have in their assessments to the Pentagon. What is the process that's going on in the Pentagon to reach the actual stage where certification could be ordered?
Well, you can count on it being a very careful, deliberate process. I believe our public affairs people said something along the lines of what you just described about recommendations being made into the secretary and the chairman. That's going on right now. We are also largely, we've, I think at this point, educated over 50% of the force, probably well over 50% of the force of 2 million people about the new environment and what repeal will mean. And so, the best I can do for you right now is what I said before. We're in the final stages of a very careful, deliberate process. And beyond that, I would not want to impose upon the prerogatives of our leadership to determine exactly when and how they will certify. And so, but I can say what has been said before publicly. We're in the final stages, and this very important decision and judgment will be teed up for the president, the secretary, and the chairman in short order, and they will make their assessments and, if appropriate, sign the certification and submit it to Congress. And then the way the law works, if and when certification is presented, the old law, 10 U.S.C. 654, is repealed 60 days thereafter. So.
And then the follow-up question is just that short order was impacted, at least in terms of the response that the department is going to have by the Ninth Circuit's order last week that sets a deadline of next Thursday to announce whether or not the department continues to defend the constitutionality of 10 U.S.C. 654, which it didn't address in its February 25th brief. How is that impacting your role right now, if at all, and how is that impacting the certification process?
Well, helping the Department of Justice frame a response to those inquiries is indeed part of my day job these days. And there will be a response at or before the deadline the Ninth Circuit gave us. I will say this. I think that we have this injunction that's now back in force. The thing that I would hope that people interested in this issue will appreciate is that repeal of this law will occur, in my judgment and the judgment of a lot of others, smoother if it is done through the democratic process, if it is done by the political branches. In other words, the Congress, the president, the secretary, and the chairman making a very deliberate judgment that this is how repeal should occur. And the way the Congress wrote the repeal law is that repeal will occur if and when the three make the judgment that repeal is consistent with military readiness, so forth and so on. That is a process that the lawmakers, the people's representatives, in consultation with the administration, devised for bringing about the end of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That is a more orderly and, in my judgment, sustainable process than a court order that suddenly imposes a worldwide injunction on the entire military worldwide to stop enforcing a law that the Congress passed in 1993. And so I guess I would ask people to consider that. The way that the Congress and the President, in devising this law and voting this law, felt was the best way to bring about repeal was through this orderly process that we're in the middle of right now and in the final stages of. So,
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Devin Chafee. I'm with the ACLU. You mentioned your concerns about the possibility of mandatory military detention for a certain sector of terrorism suspects, reiterating the concerns that you voiced before the House Armed Services Committee in March. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit on how you think such mandatory military detention would impact both the military and U.S. national security in general.
Well, I have two responses. One is, let's not make military detention controversial. Let's not invite controversy about the way in which the military captures and detains people. We have had a lot of litigation about military detention, frankly, because it became a controversial topic into which the courts felt they had to get involved, such that we have habeas litigation brought by Guantanamo detainees. There was an effort to extend the habeas remedy to Bagram in Afghanistan. And so what I said before, if you overreach, you invite challenge. And capture, detention, interrogation is a core function of the military that needs to remain intact legally. And so when we overreach, when we develop, propose, and implement controversial aspects of a detention policy, it invites challenge. It invites challenge in the courts, and we are continuing to gain credibility in the courts right now with, in a lot of the habeas cases. And so, my message in March and my message now is, let's not make detention more controversial with a lot of provisions like mandatory military detention, which also has some problems with ambiguity and vagueness. The other thing I'd say is that in terms of the conflict against al-Qaeda and its affiliates, it's a complex world. And as many national security experts have said, al-Qaeda is becoming more and more decentralized. It looks very different from the al-Qaeda of 10 years ago. Al-Qaeda relies more and more on affiliates like AQAP to attempt to plan and conduct attacks against the homeland. And so we see affiliate organizations that are becoming more and more prominent. And it's not always easy to characterize somebody as in one group versus another group. They have multiple objectives. And so we need all of the legally available tools and options we have now for dealing with this terrorist threat. So let's not limit our national security options for dealing with these threats as they arise. And, just like the terrorist threat now looks very different from the way it did 10 years ago, it may look very different 10 years from now. And so the point is, we've not hesitated to use the legally available tools we have right now, whether it's, the lawful invocation of lethal force, or detention, or military commissions prosecutions, or prosecutions in federal civilian court. And so I think it's a mistake to try to over-militarize the approach to dealing with this unconventional non-state actor. So, okay. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
What is your view of the U.S. Defense Department and State Department's use of the organization, the corporation formerly known as Blackwater, now known as Z, and are there any pending investigations of their activities abroad?
Well, what is my view? I think that private contractors serving abroad can serve a valuable service in support of the State Department mission and the Defense Department mission. There are inherently governmental functions, obviously, out there. And I won't comment on any particular investigations. There was the prosecution that everybody knows about. So I don't have a particular public view about that contractor. I think that we struggle with issues of accountability when it comes to our private contractors. They struggle with the safety of their own people and issues of responsibility. So it's a complex area. And as you point out, a lot of contractors in forward deployed areas are contractors of both the Defense and State Department. So, yes, Brody.
Mr. Johnson, I wonder, I know you've had a relationship with President Obama long before he was a serious candidate for president, and I wonder if you could speak to the significance of that relationship and the evolution of it and how it's played into your commitment to serving this administration.
I have full disclosure, Brody Kemp is my special assistant, so she just tossed me this underhanded softball that has no spin on it. And so just full disclosure. Well, one of the more remarkable experiences for me was in life is you know a man, you get to know a man on a first name basis, and then he's elected president, and then you call him Mr. President. And the first time I ever encountered Barack Obama post January 20, 2009 in the White House was a magic moment for me because I said, "Hello, Mr. President." And that's a once in a lifetime experience, I suspect, at least for me. And so I obviously have great loyalty to him, and I recognize that in one person's life, you probably only get the experience of being recruited to a presidential campaign by someone who's starting from no place, who's considered a long shot, staying with him all the way through the campaign from beginning to end, through the transition, and then part of his administration. So one thing I'm sure of is that after I serve this president and this administration, I'm done in public service because I will never be able to repeat the experience. So it's been a remarkable ride, and it hasn't all been fun. There have been frustrations, there have been challenges. There are things that we can improve upon, obviously. There are mistakes, there are victories, and so sometimes it's like a roller coaster. You're up, you're down, and you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So it's been a remarkable experience. I saw the president at the White House, I guess 2 days ago, at a meeting, and so it's been a terrific experience. I will tell you one story. Early on in the campaign, March 2007, He used to like to just call people out of the blue, call supporters, just, "Hi, this is Barack Obama," and the person on the other end would say, "Are you kidding? Come on, this is not Barack Obama. Joe, cut it out." So we did this event for him in New York in March 2007, and it was a very significant event for me because I had introduced Barack Obama to Ted Sorensen, my law partner. And Ted, early on, decided to endorse Barack Obama for president. And so we had this fundraising event where I was going to introduce Ted Sorensen, and Ted Sorensen was going to make this speech in which he endorsed Barack Obama, and then as this Kennedy-esque-like figure, and then Ted was going to introduce Barack Obama to this New York crowd. And we did it. It worked great. It was wonderful. It was a magic moment. And that was a Friday. And then the following Monday, I was down in Atlanta trying a case. And that evening, I got a call from Ted, and he said, Barack Obama just called me to say thank you for Friday's event. He might call you too. So I looked at my BlackBerry, and in those days, I guess it's still, my current BlackBerry doesn't do this, but if you get a voicemail on your office phone, it shows up on your BlackBerry, call from 312, this, and I looked and I said, he's not gonna call me. And about an hour later, I got a call from my then 11-year-old daughter at home in New Jersey, and she said, Dad, I gotta tell you something, it's really bad, something really bad happened. What? Here, talk to Mom. So, it was like 8:30 at night at our house in Montclair, New Jersey, and 8:30 at night is a really bad time to call my house because, my wife she's winding it up for dinner, she's trying to push the kids to finish their homework, everybody's a little tired. Nobody wants a sales call at 8:30 at night in my house. And so the phone rings, you can see the caller ID, it's a 312 number, and it says Obama Exploratory Committee on it. And so my wife, she doesn't pick up the phone, she hits the speakerphone. What? And she hears this male voice talking on the other end of the phone, but she's not listening to the male voice. She's hearing this person starting to talk about the Obama campaign, and she's yelling over the phone across the kitchen, "My husband just did a big fundraiser for him on Friday. We gave. We've done everything we can do." And she's not listening to the caller. And finally, she's going to kill me that I said this. Finally, she heard the voice say, "But I am Barack Obama." And as my wife described it, every sweat gland in her body opened up at that exact moment. And, "Oh, I'm really sorry." And he was very nice. He said, "Oh, we have to have dinner sometime." He's extraordinary. Part of him I think part of him enjoyed doing that kind of thing. And so my daughter Natalie calls me in Atlanta, and she said, "Guess what Mom did?" And meanwhile, Natalie being Natalie, she's looking at Mom and says, "Don't tell Daddy what you just did." But she couldn't be there. She couldn't wait to tell me. So anyway, that's all been a remarkable experience. So anyway, I'll take one more question. Yes, sir, in the back. Yes, sir, and I'll take two more questions. Yes, sir, in the back.
Sir, I understand you've been in public service, and you mentioned it's frustrating, and I have a question that might also be a little frustrating. Now, our Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal, and we are having so much trouble to have gays equal to others. It seems like a little disgrace to the American way of thinking, and I wonder why it is taking that much time. I'm sure you explained that all this dickering going on back and forth, and Congress says one way and do all these adjustments, but it is really distressing to see that the American people really don't believe that all men are created equal. And just a side question to that is that you also said about let's not the military's capture, detention, and interrogation. let's not make it a controversial, but if it does result in torture, which is again, all men are created equal, I'll use that as a standard, that we are not treating those we are capturing and mistreating and torturing as equal. All men are created equal. And doesn't it bother you? I mean, you're doing, would you have said that if when the slaves were captured and treated the same way, and if you were in public service, would you have said the same thing?
I'm going to answer your question by telling you a story. My uncle was a Tuskegee Airman, and in April 1945, my uncle, along with about 100 other Tuskegee Airmen, went to an Air Force base called Freeman Field in Indiana. And there was an Army reg then that said all officers' clubs should be integrated. And the base commander at Freeman Field, Indiana, decided, nuts to that, this officers' club is white only. And my uncle went to this officers' club with a couple of other Tuskegee Airmen, and he was refused admission and forcibly was removed from the officers' club, arrested, put in the UCMJ system. The next day, or maybe not the next day, but a couple of days later, the base commander, on the advice of the then chief legal officer of the Army Air Force, said to these mutineers, in effect, I am ordering you to sign an acknowledgement that this is a white-only officers' club and you shall not go back. And they refused to sign. And then the next day, he went back and said, it is a time of war and refusing an order is a capital offense, and I'm ordering you to sign. And they all still refused to sign, and they were all put in military detention. So my uncle was a detainee of the United States military for a period of time until George Marshall heard about it from the then Negro press and basically, I think, told the commander to get real. It's a documented event in military history called the Freeman Field Mutiny. The American experience, in my view, is it's always an evolving picture. Just
Public service is more like perspiration.
it's an evolving picture. And in 1945, my uncle would never have imagined that his nephew, yet to be born, would be the chief legal officer of the Department of Defense, serving under a president of African descent. So life is an evolving picture. And the law that President Obama signed on December 22nd, 2010, is part of that evolution. So, last question.
Jeh, you told us a little bit about your relationship with the President. Can you share with us a little bit about your relationship with your client, Secretary Gates? And specifically, I'm thinking in the spring 2009, he was asked about Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, we have a lot on our plate right now. Let's kick this can down the road a bit. And yet, in February 2010, he appeared before the Senate Armed Services Committee to report that he and Admiral Mullen were undertaking this mission. Share with us, if you can, how did he get there? What was that journey like for you and the Secretary?
I think that undertaking the review was something that even in 2009 we recognized that we were going to do at some point. And it is true that in 2009, just like it is true in 2010, 2011, I suppose, that we had a lot on our plate. During the latter part of 2009, there was the Afghanistan assessment, which occupied a lot of time for a lot of people. And so a lot of things came together in early 2010. The President decided that he was going to put this issue in the State of the Union address, and Senator Levin wanted to have a hearing on the subject of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And it was at that moment in late 2009, early 2010, that the Secretary believed that the time was right to undertake this review in consultation with the President and others. So, and it was a 10-month review, and a lot of people at the time questioned the wisdom of undertaking a review that was going to conclude right in the middle of a lame duck session of Congress. But, you know, it just given circumstances, it, I think, worked pretty well, given the timing. So anyway, that's probably the best I can do in answer to your question. Sorry. I will say that Secretary Gates is he was a remarkable client and a remarkable Secretary of Defense. He, in well-deserved retirement now, he listened well. He respected the role of the lawyer. I think I had his trust and confidence. And I would go in and present a legal issue to him and present the pros and the cons of the issue. And he would always, I think, come to a wise choice and then add 5 or 6 other perspectives from his long career in public service about the issue that I hadn't even thought of. And so it was wonderful working with him. It's wonderful working with my new boss, Secretary Panetta. I swore him in on July 1st. He brings a whole range of different perspectives, long career in Congress, head of OMB, working in the White House as Chief of Staff. And so I'm much better as a public servant having worked with these 2 remarkable public servants, and I'm sure I'm going to have a terrific time working with Secretary Panetta. So anyway, I guess that's all. I better stop talking, and thank you all so much, and thank you for your interest.